It's that time of year. New products are being released. Black Friday sales are coming. Oh, are already here. In October. The upgrade. We're all thinking about it, so it's time to ask the annual question. Would I rather have ray tracing or food? Okay, hopefully you're being a little more reasonable, but every purchase is a trade-off. When you buy something, you're giving up all the other things you could have bought with that money. Sometimes the trade-off is clear. Should I buy a GPU or a TV? Most of the time, though, you don't encounter or realize that trade-off until a new opportunity, need, or emergency comes. Yes, that got real, but it's important not to forget that this is a hobby for nearly all of us. An expensive hobby, and there are much more important things in life than what's in your computer. You wouldn't think I'd have to say that, but with all the anger and hostility in my comments and people talking about how Nvidia is among the most evil corporations in the world, and that they're leaving us with no choice but to buy super expensive GPUs, I've started to wonder. Look, it's probably just a function of how people act on social media, but if you're actually mad about anything Nvidia has done, about anything any of these companies have done with their luxury gaming hardware, please take 2 steps back and really think about your priorities. It's not that serious, all right? Just woosah.
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 You will get through this. Okay, so you've decided that you can responsibly upgrade your rig. How do you go about doing that? My wife has a somewhat successful Twitch stream, which we want to make very successful. So in October, we went to Twitchcon to learn some stuff and to make some connections. It was mostly a business trip, but we had a good time. While we were out one afternoon, I asked a few new buds about their setups. I wanted to know what they were running their streams with, but more than that, I wanted to know how they chose the parts they have, whether they were considering an upgrade, and how they would choose if and what to buy. Let me introduce you.
Twitch handle is Social Litman. I mostly stream competitive and cooperative games like Overwatch, Apex, Phasmophobia. I also do some community games. Here and there I'll do like an art stream like my glass etching, but it's been a little bit.
So my Twitch name is Still at House, STILLETHAUS. And what's my stream? My stream actually, I'm doing a lot more Overwatch these days, and I do Horde on Wednesdays.
I'm the Grand Piano Man. My channel is called The Piano Bar. I'm a variety streamer. We like to focus on just chill vibes, and as a piano man that came before me said, you know, I like to make people forget about their lives for a while.
They had wildly different stories. Kisogo Plays had started out with a pre-built and then went through a series of step-by-step upgrades.
When I was still in the Army, this was back in 2010, I bought a pre-made Dell computer. It was just for me to do stuff with. A couple years ago, I decided I was going to get some components to upgrade it, so I asked around and stuff like that. So I bought a motherboard, a graphics card, and a new processor and stuff like that. And it's the same thing I did when I eventually upgraded my graphics card later on to a GTX 1660. I wanted to be as smart as possible about what I spent on, so combined with what I afford and what could go together and what kind of experience I want to do. Yeah. Okay.
Due to a lifestyle change, he's now on a laptop, but he expects to be in the market for PC upgrades again soon. Social Itman has been building PCs with his dad for years, and he took the plunge on his own a few years ago.
I was on console for a real long time because I was moving around, college, and then in 2017 I finally moved in with my friend, and I knew it wasn't after a couple of years. I wasn't really moving anywhere. I'm like, you know what, it's time to settle down, build a PC.
His demands are light, so his only upgrade has been to accommodate Warzone.
I'm glad to say that the only things I've ever really had to replace are RAM and my graphics card once. I have a 2060, a GTX 2060, yeah. Originally I had a GTX 1060, which was great, but then once I got into Warzone, it sucks up so much.
Still at House has a true streamer setup. In his main PC, he's got the best graphics he could justify the cost of and lots of RGBs.
So I got 2070 Super. That was before, right before the 30 series was coming out, and as well I got the G-Skill RGB RAM, all that stuff, because I like all the pretty lights. I have a 3-monitor setup and a laptop for my streaming PC as well.
And finally, we have the Grand Piano Man, who blew the doors off with an essentially max build just a few weeks before TwitchCon.
The pièce de résistance is I am rocking a 3090 Ti. I wanted everything to be just in that sweet spot to where I wouldn't have to upgrade or even really think about upgrading for the next 2 to 3 years. If there's something new that I want to try with Twitch, I want to be able to do it flawlessly on my computer as long as I'm streaming, as long as I'm gaming, as long as I'm doing any of that.
Each of these streamers had different goals, but they set boundaries on the hardware they'd get to reach those goals. So what are your goals? Well, that's not the right first question. The first question is, what is your dollar limit? This is not a budget. This is the break glass in case of emergency spending boundary. If the greatest deals in history all descend on you the day you're making your purchase, how much can you spend? Okay, now reduce that number by like 30%. If your total max budget is $1,000, it's now $700. I know, it's arbitrary, but arbitrary isn't a synonym for bad. It's fine as long as it's useful. Remember, for almost all of us, this is just an expensive hobby, and we're talking about planning responsible upgrades. So now that we have a budget, let's talk about goals. What are you using your PC for? Is it just gaming? Do you also use it for work or school? Are you doing anything that has particular needs? I'm talking about video editing, music production, 3D animation, digital painting, machine learning, anything you do regularly that has hardware needs outside of the gaming mainstream. If the answer is yes, you've got some more research to do. You need to know how the software you use utilizes hardware. For example, Adobe products do not scale with CPU cores or necessarily with GPU power. Here's some examples from Puget Labs. Jumping from a 3080 at $700 to a 3090 Ti at $1,100 nets a 6% overall improvement and a 7% improvement in GPU score. So if that's your primary use case, it is just a waste of $400 to get a 3090 Ti. So if you have these kind of specialty needs, you need to make sure you're up to speed on this kind of data. Now, for the rest of you who just want glorious, organic, all-natural frames for your viewing pleasure, here's my first piece of advice. You do not need a 3090 Ti. No, seriously, if you really want one, that's fine, but don't try to convince yourself or anyone else that you need it. My second piece of advice, you probably don't even need current gen hardware. No, really. What did 3 of our 4 streamers have in common? They all have Turing GPUs, and none are feeling the need to upgrade. A while back, we looked at the Steam hardware survey that showed that 2 of the top 4 most used GPUs are Pascal. That's 6 years old. 4 of the top 10 are Turing, but for some reason, gamers feel like having last-gen hardware is fine, but buying last-gen hardware isn't. That's just ego. Like still at house, you can play most things at high settings with a 2070 Super, available on eBay for less than $250. This is doubly true if you're gaming at 1080p, 2/3 of you, according to the Steam survey. It actually looks like the price of a used 3060 Ti is falling below $300 now, giving you the ability to get 1440p and 100 FPS for pretty low buy-in. But a 2070 or 2080 will do pretty well. So along with your 2018 vintage GPU, you're going to want to look at mid-range CPUs. There's rarely a need to go for high-end for strict gaming PCs. If you're using a 9th gen Intel or a 2nd gen Ryzen or earlier, jumping to an 11th gen i5 or a Ryzen 3600 or 5600 could make an enormous difference. And if you're only gaming, let's not forget about the i3-12100, a great buy for just over $100. Looking at RAM, DDR4 is impossibly cheap these days. I paid over $200 for the 32 gigs I've got, and I could get 64 today for less, even with the pretty lights. In general, you shouldn't need more than 16, but 32 can really ease the strain on a system and let you run poorly optimized programs a little better. So it's a minor splurge that's probably worth it. When we talk about PC builds, we often forget about peripherals, but if you've got no mouse to click with and no keyboard to type on, it won't matter much since you can't see what's going on without a monitor. Boo. I think a few things are important to note. If you are on any kind of a budget, then no, that badass mechanical keyboard is not worth $200. I personally wouldn't spend more than $100 on a mouse and a keyboard. I've been working with a full-size TechWare Phantom and a TKL on a secondary machine. I splurged and picked up some specialty keycaps, and it looks and feels awesome. I don't know if it's as magical as the $250 drop shift, and I don't need to. For monitors, you have to consider your whole setup, just like you do with CPU and GPU. But unless you're looking for 4K, you can probably get a good monitor for under $200. At 1440p, there are quite a few options, and even a few decently rated off-brands with high refresh rates and FreeSync. But at 1080, you can get 144 plus frame rate for $150, including G-Sync from brands you know. If you don't already have variable refresh, it might just change your life. But more likely, it'll just make your games look a little more awesome. Okay, I think that covers it. You are now equipped to put together an awesome machine, one that will not only meet your needs, but will make you smile at your screen and your bank balance. We didn't talk about high-end machines because according to available data and the informal surveys I did at Twitchcon, most people aren't building those. But if you are, this advice is still good. And you still don't need a 3090 Ti. There are links below for some of the hardware I mentioned and for some I didn't. But before you rush out, or more likely, open a new tab, remember this: you are not a consumer. You're a person. I know all of our media, tech, and otherwise are focused on your consumer identity. What clothes to buy to express yourself, what car lets people know you're a boss but not a douche, which companies are anti-consumer or pro-consumer or consumer conscious. They're all aimed at one goal: keeping your life focused on consuming instead of living. They don't just want your money, they want you to believe that the only way to express yourself, to fulfill yourself, to be yourself, is to buy things. This is a theme I expect to return to in the future, if only as a reminder. Your identity is not what you buy. I, for example, am a father who wants to see his children thrive, and a man who wants to see people get rid of ideas that are making them miserable. What about you? Please check out the affiliate links below if you found this at all helpful, and check out the streamers who sat with me to talk. So what questions have I left unanswered? What have I answered badly? And what is your non-consumer identity? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.